Hi guys, I'm just coming back. I had a nice little break. Stretched out my hands a bit. Important thing to do. I kind of like this one when I'm doing Tunisian crochet. I stretch it through the form. Now I feel the tightness, try to relax it. And a little bit of twists here and there. So today on the live stream here, I'm doing a swatch to measure the gauge to making some mittens. So for people that makes absolutely no sense, no clue what I'm saying. Basically, I am using the yarn and hook that I plan on making a pair of mittens out of. I know the size of the mittens I want to make, but I'm not sure how many stitches and rows I'll need to do in order to get that size. And especially with Tunisian crochet, as you're crocheting, sometimes the fabric will curl or twist or actually just kind of be weird, as you can see on the bottom here. Tunisian crochet has a big roll. So in order to get accurate measurements, the best way to do that is to make a piece of fabric and then count the stitches and the rows for when I'm making the final product. Now with anything knitted or crocheted, over time the stitches will kind of relax, sort of like a pair of jeans. You first pull them out of the dryer, they seem a little bit snug. As the day goes by, they kind of loosen up a bit. Well, things that you crochet sort of behave the same way. So although I'm getting a general gauge swatch going here, I'm not going to block it or stretch it or do too much, because as mittens, they don't have to fit perfectly snug. This fabric has some stretch in it, so it'll be forgiving. And I'm not really going to spend a lot of time washing a pair of winter mittens. The stitch I'm doing here is Tunisian knit stitch. Earlier today I explained how to do that. If anybody's interested in learning, I do plan on turning this live feed eventually into a tutorial on how to make the mittens, which you can see just off screen here. Kind of having fun with these YouTube tutorials, but I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with crocheting. Lovely hobby. I don't make money doing it. The kids think it's cool that I can have a YouTube channel. And I must say, some of the likes and subscriptions, they do give back a lot of positive reinforcement to keep going and learning new things and new crafts, which is great for the brain by challenging yourself with something new. Maybe make some new connections and some new pathways. Some of the other videos on my channel have a lot of text in them, a lot of tutorial, not a lot of talking. But it takes a lot of time on a little tiny phone screen to add subtitles and explanations, so I'm trying to think that's a little bit less time intensive by doing some live streams and talking. Now, if anybody's making a swatch at home, you're watching this as the tutorial. As your fabric grows, you'll see what a really nice thick fabric it is and why it makes such nice mittens. So on the front, the side that's facing you while crocheting, you have this nice pattern. But on the inside, you have sort of this nice bumpy part, which will trap all the nice heat and keep your hands warm and block the wind. Obviously, on the most windy days, not a lot you can do. And it has some stretch. Not a whole lot, but enough. I think I'll do 2 more rows, and then we'll see about measuring it up and going through the math. Now, I am somebody who, as I crochet, I like to do math. I like multiples of 3s and 6, especially when I'm making toys. Not because I have any particular love of math, but sort of like going for a walk. It's nice on the brain. And let's face it, winter in Ottawa, I'm not usually going for too many walks. I joke with my neighbors that I tend to hibernate from Halloween up until March break. So I'm not a big fan of cold and ice. And if you go to make these mittens and this curl here at the end is driving you crazy, don't worry about that because this will not be a problem with the mitt pattern because we're going to make the cuff first and build on that, and the cuff will stop that curl from happening. And I'm just going to pick up a row of stitches here just to sort of keep it flat, and we'll see if we've got enough to measure for my gauge. Probably getting close. And you can figure out your gauge using a ruler, measuring tape. Here on my mittens I have a sort of a window, which is what I like. All right, so let's get this fabric down. I realize that usually I do not like using variegated yarn, even though I have a habit of buying it because sometimes it looks kind of weird. But this one actually pulled really pretty. I have 20 stitches going across, so we have to keep note of that. Actually quite lovely. All right, so first we have to figure out how many stitches go across in 4 inches, or about 10 centimeters. Put a marker here so we can keep track. All right, let's start blue. And we're just going to count our rows. Our stitches first, then our rows. And you want to make sure you're kind of level. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 10 centimeters is equal to 12 stitches. All right, well, technically I should finish off this row first. It'll fit a bit better. Okay, here we go. Nice and flat, but not stretched out. Again, we just count them up. 1, 2, 20. That seems to be 20. Double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20. So you see the gauge will be written something like 10 centimeter, equal to 12 stitches and 20 rows. So for making the mittens, now that we know what our gauge is, first thing you have to do is figure out what the circumference is going to be. Now, if you're making these for yourself or for somebody you know, you can take a ribbon tape. You're just going to measure across the knuckles. And in this case, we have about 20 centimeters if we're going by my hand. And you can do this in inches. It really doesn't matter what kind of unit of measurement we're using. And if I look into my notes, that is about a medium size hand width or hand circumference. Generally, if you're doing like an older kid, looking at 18 centimeters, 15 centimeters for an elementary school kid, and we're talking preschool, looking at about 12 centimeters. And if you're looking for a larger hand, it's about 23 centimeters circumference. So first we need to find out how many stitches for the circumference. So my circumference needs to be 20 centimeters. My gauge here is 12 stitches per 10 centimeters. So we have 12 stitches for 10 centimeters. And we just multiply them. So that's going to be 24. I was going to have to use my calculator, but I didn't. So we're going to remember this 20 centimeter per circumference. And right now, our magic number is 24 centimeters. The other measurement that you're going to want to have is the height from your wrist to your fingertip. So, from your base of your hand to your fingertip, you know what? Mine is, almost 19. However, I do have a little short fingers, but when I make my mittens, you notice there is some wiggle room here at the tip, as my finger is. But when I bend my hand, the fabric sort of has to wrap around a bit. So you do want to have a little bit of wiggle room on the tip. Also, the fabric is thick, so you need a little bit extra when you close off the top. I like to keep things simple. So my hand length for me is, I put in 20 centimeters. And how many rows will the total hand part be? Will be 20 centimeters, and we have 20 rows for 10 centimeters comes to 40. So this should say stitches, and this should be 40 rows. The only other measurement we're going to need for these mittens is knowing how long your thumb is. And this is from this part of your thumb to here. And you can measure this, or you can go by standard lengths. You can find the charts online. So mine is about, let's say, 7 centimeters. A little bit of a harder one to measure. So about 6 centimeters. So some length is going to be 7 centimeters. And these are basically the measurements you're going to need. However, that being said, there are some tricks around it. And all you really need is one measurement. And that's either going to be your hand length or your hand circumference. Because the length, in general, is usually just a little bit less than, equal to or less than the circumference. The wrist, we don't really need to know that for this pattern because it's going to be based off the circumference. The thumb length, is usually equal to 1/3 of the circumference. And the thumb gusset, so that's this part right here. You know, this little triangle shape here. So that's our thumb gusset. It is generally about, well, technically it's about 38% of the circumference, but you can really just round that to 40%. So all this is coming back into the circumference. If you're looking for standard sizes, and I'll just give the circumferences here because we can do the math for the other ones. If you're doing preschool, the circumference is about 5 inches or 12.5 centimeters. Elementary school is 15 centimeters. A teen or a small adult, if you have particularly fine hands, it is going to be 18 centimeters in the circumference. And for an adult, the small size is 20 centimeters and large is 23 centimeters. But don't get too focused down onto the exact centimeter because this pattern does have stretch, it is thick, but also it is going to relax and sort of get a little bit wider with time. So however you do your math, figure out which is best for you. These mittens I have made to my hand size, and I made them the adult small. The ones that I'm going to make in this tutorial, I'm going to go down into one size smaller. But that will be for the next video. So the main thing that you'll have to know to join into the next video, into part 2, is going to be your magic number, which is the circumference of your hand, which in this case for me, I measured at 20 centimeters. And we just did some basic math about how many stitches that would be and how many rows. But we will review just the basic math at the beginning of the next one. If you have any questions about doing your gauge or doing the math, feel free to leave a question or comment below. I will see them and I will get back to you. But like I said, this is my hobby, so it might be a couple of days. And the last big question is, what do I do with this gauge swatch now? Can admire it for a minute. If you want, you could weigh it to find out if you have enough yarn. That'd be some other math. So basically you would take the weight and figure out how much surface area you have. So multiply the length times the width, how much weight goes into it, and do a quick calculation if your height is going to be that. But I will say that the size of balls that you usually get for worsted weight yarn are going to be more than enough. You'll need a ball of your main color and then the inside color. So in this case, I'm going to use this purpley blue color. But now we're done with the gauge and there's no point in wasting some yarn. So we'll just unravel it. I stick my yarn on it, make it easier here. All right, join me in the next couple of days when we go into part 2, which will be making the cuff.